Hey guys, Michael Keane here. It is MUBI Monday, hashtag MUBI Monday. And we're going to be talking about some MUBI. This is the, I believe, 7th vlog in this series that no one cares about, but that's okay because I'm enjoying myself. This vlog is all about, man, just go out and watch some movies. They don't gotta be the movies that you like watching all the time. They can just be whatever, man. Before we get into everything, remember to like and subscribe and all that jazz. The more subscribers I get, the more videos that I will put out, and they will be not related to this because I love people. This Thursday, we should have another very special Vinegar Syndrome video coming out, so don't abandon me yet. I am going to talk about some sleaze, but today we're just talking about some good old indie bullshit. Let's get into some MUBI. Also, my camera, actually, this is my second time doing this. My camera wasn't recording when I first started, so these first ones are going to be footage, heavy. Let's get into it. Laurent Lafitte, more like Laurent Lafitte, am I right? School's Out from 2018, director Sébastien Marnier. And School's Out is the story of a bunch of weird kids and their substitute teacher who is called in after their OG teacher throws himself out a fucking window, and then hilarity does not ensue. It is a environmentally conscious thriller, I guess. I would say it's a thriller. It's resoundingly good. And that's kind of the theme for the week, is resoundingly good. It's very heavy-handed, but has a necessary message. It's probably strongest when using the disconnect between adults and the current generation of teenagers. There's a lot of very, tense moments that come out of that dynamic. It's definitely not a horror film, so don't go in expecting that. And it does have a problem of kind of showing its hand a little early. There's a lot of potential outcomes that are brought up, and as soon as they're brought up, you're like, oh, well, that's not going to be the case. When they say, oh, what if, the kid starts shooting up the school? Well, that's not going to happen because they brought it up. That's going to break the entire rules of crafting a psychological thriller right there. It's not a big deal, but it is, it takes away, because at a certain point you start to realize, oh, this is what they're doing. And it definitely shows its cards. It also is a little on the nose. It is very blunt. That's another theme for this week, is everything's very blunt. All the politics are very straightforward, simplistic. In this case, even some of the basic themes are very simplistic. Our main character, played by Laurent Lafitte, he is doing his thesis on Kafka and is constantly finding roaches in his apartment.
Do you get it?
But yeah, it's got a striking final image. It is certainly worth the watch. I think if you have the time, watch it. It's very nice to look at the very least, and it does keep you on your toes. It's never boring. So overall, an entertaining, fun movie to start off the week. Good times. Next up, from the 21st, Tales of Ginza. This is 1955. This is going to be the second in the Yuzo Kawashima collection series, whatever, that MUBI is doing, and it does not disappoint. Much like Red Light, it is extremely enjoyable. It is very well shot. I think my favorite thing about this particular film is where Red Light was very kind of traditional from a narrative standpoint. This one plays around with narrative a bit. For one thing, it is kind of a neighborhood ensemble. It takes place in the neighborhood of Ginza, which is, at the time, it was this kind of bustling kind of center of commerce in Tokyo, and it still is that. It's currently, it is where you go to get all your high fashion and stuff. So it's a very big deal, very notable place in Tokyo. I did look all that up because I don't know jack shit about Tokyo outside of what I see in movies. But it's a fun mix of ensemble drama, noir, and kind of a faux documentary approach. A lot of the film is anchored by this narration that basically presents itself as explaining the various parts of the neighborhood and how every city has its own Ginza, et cetera, and then uses that as a framing device for any given scene to kind of see where the characters are at. And it's interesting that way. It does eventually kind of turn into a very much an actual film noir, almost crime thriller. which is a little weird because most of the movie is about this woman who she had a painting done of her years ago when she was younger, and now she's not putting a lot of effort into it, but she is kind of looking for who painted the painting, and all she has is his initials, GM. And we go from there. There's a guy who sells flowers. He's one of the main characters. There's this painter that's outside of her house. There's this douchey sort of society prick. There's all kinds of characters, a shitload of characters. It really delves into the underbelly of a neighborhood like Ginza, while also, not necessarily, it's not saying that it's a bad place, but more that it is a place where things are not always what they seem. It's not all glitz and glamour, and there are people who live there, who have lives, and there's more to it. There's drugs, there's prostitution. It's a very fascinating story. I would say I probably liked Red Light a little bit more, but I'd have to give it some time to really consider the two, and probably have to rewatch Red Light, to be honest. But Tales of Ginza, really solid film. I look forward to more Kawashima. He's good stuff. Next up, from the 22nd of January, is Maggie from 2018, directed by Yi Ok-seop. I don't know how to say that name. It's Korean. So this is a South Korean film. I wasn't sure at first, but then I realized, South Korea, they are bonkers, and you got to watch that bonkers cinema. So this film, it's from the Direct from Rotterdam series, and that just means it comes from the Rotterdam Film Festival. So selections from that MUBI is able to stream, and it is utterly bizarre and disinterested in standardized plotting. It is not a conventional film at all. There are pros and cons to that, and I saw a lot of negative reviews for this one, and I get it. I understand why you might not like this. It is not for everyone. While it is not necessarily strong on plot, it is very strong on theme. The theme is just all about trust and how we give trust to other people, specifically in romantic relationships more so. At least that's where it kind of ends up, but it kind of examines all sorts of types of trust. And it's interesting because it's not a normal plot. It runs around. The first 20, 30 minutes are definitely the strongest of the bunch. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get lost on this one, because they are in for this whose penis is that drama. And then it kind of leaves that behind, and suddenly we're in a whole nother story, and it almost comes off like it's basically an anthology that shares characters. And if you go in knowing that's what you're going to get, I think you'll have a very good time. I think if you focus too much on the initial plot setup, it's going to be a little less fun for you. But the overall film is very bizarre. It is narrated by a catfish. I'm just going to throw that out there. And I think the best thing about South Korean cinema is that they blend genres and tones really well. I think if you enjoy experiments in narrative, you'll have a good time. It's also one of those movies that it really comes together with the final shot. It's kind of like School's Out, where the final shot really ties everything together. And so I think, stick through it. The middle chunk, it gets a little tedious here and there, but if you can wait that out, which it's not a terribly long movie, you'll have a good time. Or maybe not. I don't know. I tend to like things. From the 23rd, Fainting Spells. This one's from 2018. This is the indigenous shorts from Sundance Institute lineup. Director is Sky Hopinka, whatever. So this one is one of those movies. It's a short film. It's like 11 minutes long, and it's basically, but what if you were doing smoking an Indian pipe plant while watching this essay about the earth from which we come, I guess. I don't really know what was happening, but I do know that the idea for the film is to kind of give you the experience of using this plant and kind of the hallucinogen properties it creates for you. And in that way, it's a lot of fun. I have not watched this movie on drugs, but I highly recommend that you do. I think you'll have a great time. Or not. I don't know. I haven't tested that beforehand. Go be a guinea pig, man. I have nothing else to say about this. It's really good, but I'd have to watch it a few more times to really get it, because I don't really know where the filmmakers are coming from. I did not do any research. I'm bad at what I do. I don't know what to tell you. Next up, from the 24th, Sons of Denmark, 2019. So one of the films from last year. It's direct from Rotterdam, so Rotterdam Film Festival, I assume, last year. And director Ulla Salim. And Sons of Denmark is interesting. It's another, again, one of those films that is very blunt. It is not terribly interested in being subtle about anything. Its politics are right on its sleeve. Basically, it's in the next 4 years. I think it literally takes place 4 years from now. So 2023, and basically the idea is that there's this far right movement that's anti-immigrant in Denmark, which is and we follow this young guy who is being indoctrinated into this anti-right-wing group. He's a Muslim boy, and he, is feeling threatened by this. There's a politician who's rising up through the ranks, who's kind of their go-to. It's a very direct analog to Donald Trump and that whole alt-right movement. And things happen. I saw, this is kind of a learning moment actually for everybody. If you stop watching a movie 30 minutes in, and it's let's say a 2-hour movie, don't leave a review, because you're going to sound like an idiot. Like this guy did, who said that it's just your standard immigrant story. It's not your standard immigrant story. Small spoilers here. About 50 minutes in, about an hour-ish into the movie, we change protagonists. Yeah, it totally flips everything on its head. It is not, it's one of those twists that in the moment I found surprising, but looking back, I don't find it to be all that much of a shocker. It is very organic what happens. And I think it kind of fits into really the whole feel of the film. It is not it's a pretty film. It's very well made. You can tell it's on a budget, but they knew how to utilize that budget so that nothing was really showing as too cheap. But it feels visually kind of generic. It feels like just another movie. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I'd rather it be a little generic than obviously not working. And even saying that, it has a sheen. I don't want to make it sound like it's not a well-made film. It's very well made. It's just, it doesn't have any real flair to it, which is fine because it's tackling issues head on. I think it does have that problem of, because it's so just fine visually, it probably never really had much of a chance. Actually, I don't even know how it did in Denmark. I was going to say it never had a chance to go mainstream with its discussion, but I don't know its release history. Obviously, it didn't have a wide release here. It's a Danish film, so I'd be curious to know how it did in its native country. And it's a lot like School's Out in terms of subtlety, in that it's not. It has a very, very disturbing image near the end that I've personally found very hard to watch. And so I think it does its job in sort of this blunt examination of modern politics. I think if you are someone who is, super right-wing anti-immigrant, you might feel a little attacked. I don't know a lot of right-wingers that are watching this vlog, but it's putting it out there. But I think it's blunt but necessary. And I think that's, again, kind of the theme of this is a lot of these are blunt but necessary. None of them are terribly subtle. Speaking of not terribly subtle, from the 25th, this is another 2018 film. This one won the Berlin Film Festival's Golden Bear, and it is called the most controversial Berlinale Golden Bear in history, which that's exciting. This is Touch Me Not from 2018, directed by Adina Pintilli, I'm going to say. And I can understand why it's controversial. It is a movie with a lot of penises and a lot of tits and a lot of vagina and a very direct look at sexuality. More specifically, the film as a whole is all about intimacy. It follows a actress, let's see, who's the actress's name? Laura Benson, who plays a character named Laura, and it's hard to tell if this is an actual problem she has or if it's just her doing an acting job. We'll get more into that in a second. But Laura has intimacy problems. She just doesn't want to be touched by other human beings. And so we follow Laura as she embarks on various ventures. She watches a call boy wash himself and jerk off, which is fun. She has a visit with a trans prostitute, which is fun. She works with real-life intimacy consultant Shawnee Love, who's a interesting dude. And then she also attends, well, I say attends, she kind of looks in on these group therapy sessions. And there she, meets Tomas Lemarquez, who plays Tutor. And Lemarquez, you might know from, he was in X-Men Apocalypse. He was Caliban. And then, And then he was the like a file clerk or something in Blade Runner 2049. Those are the mainstream things he's done. He kind of looks like the guy from what's it? The guy who played Zaz in Gotham, but different guy. And he has alopecia, so he has no hair on his body, and he is a wonderful man to look at. Like, just looking at him is fascinating. On the one hand, he's the most interesting to look at, but on the other hand, he has the one storyline in the film that is the most sort of weird with how it's trying to portray things. Basically, he's stalking his ex-girlfriend, and it's a minor subplot, but it is that one moment where you're kind of like, what exactly are we trying to get here? It makes the message feel a little muddled. I assume it's there to show you that there are ways in which attempting to find intimacy can go horribly wrong. But it could have done a better job explaining that. There's another guy who he has some sort of disorder where his whole body is basically useless, except for more or less his hands and his penis. And he's very interesting to watch as well. He's part of that group therapy. And it's interesting how all these characters' lives are examined to show how there's more to intimacy and sexuality than how the mainstream tends to portray it. And I can see how that would rile some people. I saw some reviews that were very praising of this film. I saw some reviews that were saying it was incredibly awful. I would say it's neither. It is very good. I was not a big fan of when the director actually put herself in the movie. It worked okay at first, but there was a moment where it felt a little too self-aggrandizing for me. And Laura Benson's generally really great to watch. Her conversations with these people are very interesting. I would say that's actually where it shines, is just watching two people talk. Fantastic. It's generally a good-looking film. I would not call it like a visual marvel, but it has its own style, and it's enjoyable to watch, which is what you want, I guess. Overall, it's a fascinating mixed bag. I highly recommend it, but understand that you might feel weird about it depending on how you feel about sexuality and how you feel about intimacy. It can be very hard to watch in that way. And it does get pretentious. I'll say it does get pretentious, but I don't think that pretentiousness ever sinks the ship. I think that it's still a worthwhile viewing experience. And then finally, from the 26th, we've got Birds in the Earth. Birds in the Earth, 2018, directed by Marha Helander. I don't know these names. This is another Indigenous Shorts from Sundance Institute film. It's I think it's also an 11-minute short. Pretty quick, and it basically uses various dances and locations. Follows two ballerinas who are dancing throughout these locations. Yeah, it's basically the story of the indigenous Sami people in Finland. I would not have known that without looking it up. I could have gotten the environmental message it was kind of putting forth, but it's not a very straightforward film. It's another avant-garde short. But I will say, much like Fainting in the Sky, is that what it's called? Fainting Spells. I'm bad at everything. Much like Fainting Spells, it is a lot of fun to watch. It's very enjoyable visually, and frankly, avant-garde films for me, if their message isn't fairly obvious to me, they kind of live or die based on their visuals. I think sometimes avant-garde films can feel kind of lazy, like they don't need to be visually interesting because that's beneath them or something. And both of these are visually exciting and interesting films, and I enjoyed watching them. This one specifically has more of a cinematography angle going on, whereas the previous film it's a lot of like negatives and seemingly random imagery that is, again, fun to look at, but not quite as standard enjoyable, if that makes any sense. Not your average everyday just well done cinematography. This has more of that, where it's obviously shot by professionals. It's a film trying to communicate the troubled history of an indigenous people, and as long as they're not trying to get a mainstream audience for that, and it's just them trying to like put themselves out there and get some art done, great job. Good stuff. And that's it. That's the week. This is a pretty not short video, but I like to pretend it's short. Anyway, yeah, so that's it. Sorry for the start where I had to, I didn't have the camera going. I'm an idiot. That's just who I am. This week is looking interesting so far. MUBI put out their kind of what's up next list via email, where they kind of say, here's some of the things coming. It looks fun. I hope it's fun. So far, I'm having a good time. It does feel like this month is taking forever because I'm watching a movie every day, plus my Vinegar Syndrome stuff, plus other things I just want to watch. Like, it's woof so much. But yeah, I'll be back on Thursday with the next video, which is a very special unboxing. I'm very excited. And yeah, go watch more movies, buckaroos.